This, folks, is the 2024 Mercedes-Benz GLE 450e 4MATIC. And the most important thing you need to know about it is that it is the longest range PHEV plug-in hybrid that I've tested yet. Officially, it is rated for 77 kilometers on a full charge. That's actually the least I got out of it. Credit all the Germans these days for providing the most accurate range estimations. The most I got out of it, however, is 89 kilometers, which is pretty close to the nirvana of 100 kilometers that everybody's hoping that PHEVs will soon offer. Caveat emptor, it was done in perfect conditions, it was warm, there wasn't too much traffic. One anomaly with this car, again the Mercedes GLE 450e, is that brake regeneration isn't really that strong. In other words, unlike most EVs and PHEVs that get their best electrical autonomy in stop-and-go traffic because they're using brake regen, this one actually gets its best range when it's cruising between 80 and 100 kilometers an hour. So, off the bat, best EV range of any PHEV I've tested yet. By comparison, the previous best was the Toyota RAV4 Prime that got 72 kilometers, if I remember correctly, out of 18.1 kilowatt hours. The next best was the Mitsubishi Outlander PHEV that got 64 kilometers or so out of 20 kilowatt hours. This one is getting its 77 or 89 out of 23 kilowatt hours, which means its efficiency at those 89 kilometers is about 26.1 kilowatt hours per 100 kilometers. That's damn near as good as most EVs. It's certainly more efficient than most other PHEVs. So again, kudos to Mercedes-Benz. The other attribute that's worthy calling out for this Mercedes-Benz GLE 450e is that it's one of the few PHEVs that offers DC fast charging. Mercedes says it can charge up to 60 kilowatts at peak. Its average is actually closer to 40 kilowatts. But that said, it'll do a full charge in 30 minutes and a 60% charge in about 20 minutes. There's also level 2 charging available, standard home operating procedure, and it takes about 3 hours to get a full charge. Now, there's still a few people that use a 120 volt socket to charge their PHEVs, which was fine when you only had 6 or 10 kilowatt hours of battery. This one's got 23.1, and if you charge it using a 120 volt outlet, it's going to be about 24 hours, which means you're not getting a full charge overnight. So it pretty much mandates that you've got to upgrade your charging system at home. Performance-wise, the 450e is adequate to good, but not outstanding. It's got 381 horsepower and I think 479 pound-feet of torque, the combination of the gas motor, which is a 2.0 liter turbo, and the 131 horsepower synchronous DC motor. But it weighs about 2,600 kilograms, which kind of blunts things. So from 0 to 100 is 6.1 seconds. Not slow, but not quite as fast as those fairly exemplary power figures would seem to indicate. Interestingly, there's another GLE 450 without the E that's powered by Mercedes' new, relatively new, 3-liter inline-6 turbo with mild hybrid that boasts only 375 horsepower, 6 horsepower less, but because it's lighter, it gets to 100 kilometers an hour in 5.6 seconds. The other anomaly, and this is a little weird, is that both the 450 3.0 liter inline six and the 450e plug-in hybrid are the exact same price, $90,100. We haven't seen that kind of price parity before, except for really premium automobiles like BMW's i7. In this case, it appears that Mercedes is making the choice quite stark. In other words, you get 2 extra pistons and a little smoother gas engine, or you can have 23.1 kilowatt hours of battery and up to 89 kilometers of autonomy. I don't know about anybody else, but I know I'd gladly give up 2 pistons to get, you know, almost 90 kilometers of almost free motoring. Interesting. What that means is Mercedes-Benz Canada is really, really pushing the plug-in EV, hoping to get their fleet numbers down. So far, so good with the 450e. It's not perfect though. My pet peeve with this Mercedes, and perhaps all Mercedes, remains some of its interior digitization, shall we call it. For instance, the radio channel selection is all tiled. And what you have to do to get from, say, channel 8, which I listen to frequently, to, say, channel 25, classic vinyl, which I also listen to quite a bit, is you got to reach over and do this. And all the tiles slide by, and you got to watch it to be able to pick out the right one. That's as distracting as watching a cell phone. Frankly, not a good idea. There's also this tiny little haptic button, barely the size of my fingernail or thumbnail, that you can slide sideways to do it 1 channel at a time, but it's not reliable. Sometimes it flips and sometimes it doesn't. In other words, if you're an inveterate channel hopper like I am, just a knob would do really fine, Mercedes. We don't need all this crap. The other pet peeve is another slidey thing over here. And it's supposed to be haptic. It's about that long. And you swipe it up and down like this. And that's the control of the speed of your cruise control. In other words, you know, you can ask for 10 at a time if you want by hitting the button, but you got to slide this thing about 5 or 6 times to get 3 kilometers extra on the cruise control system. What a pain in the ass. Mercedes had the slightly awkward looking lever on the side here, and yes, it looked a little ungainly, but it was a lot easier to use on this. Again, not everything needs to be digitized here, guys. I know Mercedes-Benz is a German car company, and I know they like to be precise, and I know they're technocrats, but you don't need to digitize everything possible just because you can. Otherwise, though, the interior is pretty darn good. The Burmester audio system is most excellent. Blew my eardrums right out. And the other feature I really like, is that when you put the seat heaters on, the center console heats up. It's so cool. I think this is great. I mean, unfortunately, this is the warmest October we've had so far. But in the winter, would I like driving this thing around with both arms heated and my butt as well? Number 1 to Mercedes. Infotainment systems and wonky buttons aside, the 450e is a really excellent car. I recently did a motor mouth on the subject of PHEVs, and basically, if you assume that pretty much everybody's daily commute is something less than 60 kilometers, StatsCan puts our one-way work commute for the average Canadian at only 8.7 kilometers, okay? So the range of the Mercedes GLE 450e is well within most people's daily routines. Which means if you plug it in every night, or even probably every second night, you can go for weeks, at least until you go to the cottage or go on a long trip from Toronto to Montreal, Vancouver to Calgary, whatever it may be. You won't use any gasoline. I did some rough numbers, and for a typical Canadian, it means the reduction of CO2 emissions out the tailpipe of between 75 and as much as 90%. That would be for people who don't take that many road trips. So it begs the question, do we really need 100% EVs? Let's choose a round number. If 50% of our automotive fleet going forward is pure EVs, and the other half is PHEVs like this Mercedes that get rid of 80% of the CO2 production from the gasoline engine, that's a net reduction for our total fleet of 90%. You're not going to convince me that we need that last 10% for the planet to survive. So from my point of view, a PHEV as capable as the 450e deserves to be a large part of our future fleets. It's that good. I'm David Booth for Driving.ca.